high side. Murphy shooting, save a rebound on the view.
Hey everyone, this is Casey. You are watching the Red Rubber Duckman All Sports Network, and it's finally time to predict the 2025 NCAA Men's Basketball Tournament. Now, there's a whole lot of ways that this tournament could go, and I've been picking brackets for close to 11 years now, and I still have not picked a national champion. Either they go out in the first round or the second. Either they go out in the second or the Elite Eight. I think one instance I've had Purdue winning it all in 2023, but you pretty much know what happened. But it's still fun to fill out a bracket and maybe a crash out or two when a team you have going very far goes out in the first round. But that's the beauty of March Madness. Anything can happen. But looking at the bracket, there's a whole lot of potential upsets, a whole lot of potential Cinderellas. But there's still one team that I think probably has an easy path to win it all. And you'll probably see why once I go over the bracket. But let's start with the South region. You have the top seed overall, Auburn, taking on the winner of Alabama State and St. Francis. You have Louisville and Creighton, Michigan and UC San Diego, and Texas A&M and Yale. Predicting, I'm going to go through each half of each region for the first round. Looking at the bracket, I can see Auburn and Louisville moving on. Of course, Auburn, you have Janai Broome, and Louisville, they're having a resurgence. It's their first year with their new head coach, and they finished as the runners-up in the ACC tournament against Duke, and they put up a good fight, but they just ran out of gas in the last few minutes. But I have Auburn and Louisville meeting, and I'm gonna have a huge upset pick here. Actually, I'm gonna have two of them. I have UC San Diego in their first year of eligibility beating Michigan. I mean, look at the season that they had. A 30-win season. They've been blowing out opponents left and right. They even took care of UC Irvine so many times. And UC Irvine was actually a very popular pick for an at-large for a majority of the season. And UC, I think the Tritons definitely have what it takes to pull off a major shock here. And the same thing with Yale. We saw what Yale can do in the tournament. We saw what Ivy League teams could do in the tournament. Like, I think 2 years ago was Princeton's run to the Sweet 16. And Yale last year, they managed to take out Auburn. And I think they could do the same thing with Texas A&M this year. So, with that, we're guaranteed. So, based on my predictions, we're guaranteed a double-digit seed in the Sweet 16. Going to the bottom half of the bracket, we have Ole Miss taking on the winner of San Diego State and North Carolina. And then you have Iowa State taking on Lipscomb. You have Marquette and New Mexico. And then Michigan State taking on Bryant. Now, going from the bottom up, it's pretty straightforward. I have Michigan State moving on. I have Marquette moving on. I have Iowa State, despite the rocky road and Lipscomb being a very popular 14-3 upset pick. I still have the Cyclones moving on. But there's one thing I learned when watching this tournament. It's do not doubt anyone. 2016, when Syracuse was selected to be in the NCAA tournament, people were stunned. People thought they didn't deserve a bid. And look what happened. They made it all the way to the Final Four before faltering to North Carolina. And guess what? 9 years later, I could see North Carolina being in the same situation. Because how did they get in over West Virginia? like you have West Virginia's governor saying that the NCAA made a mistake here. And because he said that, I'm going to say watch North Carolina win their first round game against San Diego State and then take out Ole Miss. It just seems so poetic. So that's why I have North Carolina moving on. But I can even see San Diego State taking out Ole Miss there. Let's head on down to the West region. You have the top seed Florida. You have Norfolk State. And then you have the two-time reigning, defending, undisputed national champions in the UConn Huskies. And then you have Oklahoma. The 12-5 matchup is Memphis and Colorado State. And then you have the 4-13 matchup with Maryland and Grand Canyon. Now, Grand Canyon, I think, has a chance, and as does Colorado State, but I just don't see any upsets happening in this part of the West region. I have Florida, UConn, Memphis, and Maryland moving on to the second round. As for the bottom half, you have Missouri taking on Drake. You have Texas Tech taking on UNC Wilmington. Kansas and Arkansas in the border war, in somewhat of a border war. Then you have St. John's taking on Omaha, another first-timer. This is where I have the upsets. I have Drake taking down Missouri, which I think is which is going to be the most popular 11-6 upset in this tournament. And of course, I have Texas Tech moving on. And in the border war, I was pretty shocked that Arkansas actually made it in, but that's why I'm going to have Arkansas moving on against Kansas, because Kansas, they've been on a downward spiral. I think they were the preseason number 1 going in, and they just had a big fall from grace, and I think it's going to continue. I think they go one and done in this tournament. And St. John's, it's amazing what Rick Pitino has done, and that's the kind of coach he is. If you hire him, you're eventually going to have a dream season, and that's what St. John's is in the middle of right now. And I think it's going to continue. Now let's head on over to the East region. You have the top seed, Duke, taking on the winner of American and Mount St. Mary's. The 8-9 matchup consists of Mississippi State and Baylor. And then you have Oregon taking on Liberty. And then you have Arizona taking on my Akron Zips. And as for the picks for upset, I have Baylor and Liberty. Now, a lot of the guys that I talked to, if you saw the live reaction, they're pretty high on Oregon making the Final Four, but they tend to underestimate what good of a team Liberty is. And this is not the first time that Liberty has been in a position for a 12-5 upset. And as a matter of fact, they did the same thing back in 2019 when they took down Mississippi State. And speaking of Mississippi State, this is the only 8-9 upset I have. I know, spoilers, but you'll see why once we get down to the Midwest region. I have Baylor taking out Mississippi State. And Liberty, a very popular 12-5 upset pick, I'm sure. And Akron, as much as I want Akron to pull off the upset, and Arizona does have bad luck in this tournament, I just don't see it happening. I want Akron to win, but I think Arizona is going to win. And then the 6-11 matchup is BYU and VCU. And then you have Wisconsin taking on Montana. St. Mary's and Vanderbilt as 7-10. And then you have Alabama and Robert Morris. But this one I have pretty straightforward. Of course, Vanderbilt is a very tough team to crack. Of course, they were one of the members of the SEC. 14 teams from the SEC in this tournament. But St. Mary's has shown that they can hang with the big boys. And as for Alabama, I just don't see it happening. I just don't see a 15-2 upset happening here. GDR was pretty high on Robert Morris during our live reaction, but I just don't see it happening. But this Wisconsin-Montana game, it's a Sophie's choice for him. And that's why, see, Montana happened to be his home state. I didn't really know that. but he does live in Wisconsin. So yeah, this is a Sophie's Choice game for him. And I have Wisconsin moving on and taking on BYU. So no upsets here, but there is a slight possibility with Montana over Wisconsin here. As for the Midwest region, you have the top seed Houston. They're taking on SIU Edwardsville, making their first ever tournament appearance. You have a very tasty 8-9 matchup with Gonzaga and Georgia. And then you have Clemson taking on McNeese. And then you have Purdue taking on High Point, also their first ever appearance. So congrats to High Point. As for who I think will make it out of the second round, I see no upsets happening here. I know Purdue tends to have that curse of double-digit seeds knocking them out. It took a year off last year, considering they were a 16-1, so obviously they had to have a Virginia-style run. Obviously, it came up short because UConn was just too damn strong. And there is a good chance of that happening again, but I just don't see it. Because Purdue does have experience in this tournament, and I'm sure they're sick and tired of losing the double-digit seeds. And Clemson and McNeese is a strong team, but I think this is the least likely 12-5 upset in this whole tournament. Clemson is one of the three powerhouses this season in the ACC, with Duke and Louisville obviously being the other ones. North Carolina, yeah, they kind of had a weaker season compared to others in the conference. But I have Clemson moving on, taking on Purdue. And then I have Gonzaga taking on Houston. And I don't really have any upsets in the bottom part either. You have Illinois taking on the winner of Texas and Xavier. You have Kentucky taking on Troy. UCLA taking on Utah State. And Tennessee taking on Wofford. Now, I don't have any 15-2 upsets here, but Wofford, I think does have a chance to take down Tennessee. I've seen them play in the Southern Conference tournament. They have shown that they are capable of some pretty big upsets. I just do not see it happening here with Tennessee. And, of course, UCLA and Utah State, that's basically a coin flip matchup. I could see either one of them winning that. Kentucky and Troy. I think Troy is also a very popular 14-3 upset pick. But I have Kentucky moving on with Mark Pope, leading them to victory. And I just don't see any redemption arcs for Texas and Xavier in this one. I have Illinois moving on. Now back to the South region as we have our second round picks. Obviously, I said we're guaranteed a double-digit seed in the Sweet 16 since I had UC San Diego and Yale. I have Auburn and Yale moving on. While UC San Diego does have a strong team, I think you just cannot deny the power of the Ivy League. I'm going to say Yale moves on to the Sweet 16. I would pick Yale regardless if they were facing UC San Diego or Michigan. They just have a very strong team with Townsend becoming a household name over there in New Haven, Connecticut. I think Auburn and Yale will be the Sweet 16 matchup in that top part of the South region. In the bottom part, bring me back to 2009. I have Michigan State taking on North Carolina. The Tar Heels are just going to continue to piss everybody off. They're going to take out a very strong team in Iowa State. And it's going to be very wacky if North Carolina does end up making the Sweet 16. I have them going on a little I told you so tour. And I think it's going to happen again with North Carolina and Michigan State. And you're probably going to hate me for what I have in store for the West region here. But I have Memphis and UConn moving on. And I'm sure a lot of you are like, what? You have UConn beating Florida? Do they really have Do they really have good weed up there in Ohio? Good weed up in Ohio? I'm disliking this video. I'm unsubscribing. Let me explain. So, every year where I fill out a bracket, it seems like every time I have UConn not going very far, they exceed expectations and they go on to win the national championship. In fact, back in 2014, I had them losing to St. Joseph's of all teams, but they would go on to win their first round game, and then another, and another, and another, and another, and another. UConn going on a very deep run. And the same thing happened in 2023. I had Iona finally breaking their first round curse, but it didn't happen, and UConn would go on to win in Houston once again. Now, do I see Florida winning? Of course. But this is UConn we're talking about. They're still a strong team despite the number 8 seed. They always turn on around tournament time. They piss people off, and I think it's going to happen again. As for Maryland, I did hear from Valor that they do tend to collapse at some point. It's been a long time since they've been in the Sweet 16. I'm going to say Memphis takes down Maryland. As for the bottom half, I don't see any more upsets. I see St. John's taking out Arkansas and Texas Tech taking out Drake. Those two teams are very, very strong, and it's going to be a very, very great Sweet 16 matchup should we get it. As for the East region, no more upsets. I have Duke and Arizona. Sure, Liberty does have a chance, but I think this is where the run ends. Duke and Arizona in the Sweet 16. As for the bottom half of the East, I have BYU taking down Wisconsin. Now, you saw me react to the Big Ten championship. Wisconsin needs to find a way to fill the score sheet and fast, because BYU, they've had to deal with teams like Houston and Iowa State. They can hang with the big boys, and BYU, I think, can take out Wisconsin and go on to the Sweet 16. As for Alabama, this team is too talented not to put them in the Sweet 16. Like, are you kidding me? There's no way I cannot put them in there with Grant Nelson and Mark Sears. And this team made the Final Four last year, and they still have the talent. They still have the talent from last year. I think Alabama is definitely going to find a way to move on to the Sweet 16. And now over to the Midwest region. I have Houston, of course, beating Gonzaga, and then Clemson taking out Purdue. If you lose to a 16 seed, you're pretty much guaranteed to go on a national championship run. And Purdue was one win away from pulling off a full Virginia, but I just don't see Purdue going far in this tournament this year. Clemson, I think is too strong. They had to deal with Duke, for God's sake. And I think Clemson will move on against Houston. As for the bottom half of the Midwest region, give me Kentucky and Tennessee. Let them go all out again. Kentucky won on the road. Kentucky won at home. Let's see what happens when you put them in a neutral site. Give me Kentucky and Tennessee in the Sweet 16. That's going to be a lot of fun. So to recap what I have for the South region, I had Sweet 16, I had Auburn and Yale. And then the other half, I had North Carolina and Michigan State. The two teams that I have moving on to the Elite Eight out of that region are Auburn and Michigan State. This is where the Cinderella runs end for Yale and North Carolina. And so Auburn and Michigan State I have as the Elite Eight matchup in the South region. As for the West region, I have UConn and Memphis, and Texas Tech and St. John's. I have UConn continuing their Emperor Palpatine run, and I have St. John's continuing their dream run. That's right, I have another all-conference matchup, but this time in the Elite Eight. UConn and St. John's. They produced some classics. St. John's, of course, they pulled off the regular season sweep. I want to see UConn. I hope it doesn't happen, but at the same time, UConn and St. John's in the Elite Eight, it's too good of a matchup to not watch. And then over in the East region, you have Duke and Arizona and BYU and Alabama. Give me the top 2 seeds in this region too. Give me Duke and Alabama. Let them fight. And it's going to be a really, really good matchup. Should we get it? Key word is should we get it. And then in the Midwest, Houston and Clemson, and then Kentucky and Tennessee. I could see Kentucky pulling off the sweep, and I see Houston ending Clemson's run. So instead of going over 2 matchups at the same time, let's start with the Midwest region with Auburn and Michigan State. Now, Auburn has proved to be a strong team, and Michigan State definitely can go on a deep run every 2, 3, 4 years. And I'm going to say Michigan State ends the top seed overall's run. I'm going to say Michigan State going to the Final Four. I'm sure that's a very popular Final Four pick, Michigan State is. And this is probably the first year where the top seed overall isn't the highest, isn't the most popular team picked. That's why I was so unsure about Auburn being the overall number 1 seed. I thought that was going to go to Duke, but then again, I'm not part of the selection committee. I have Michigan State taking out Auburn. As for UConn and St. John's, give me the full sweep. St. John's taking out UConn, ending the three-peat dream, and saving America from another UConn avalanche. As for Duke and Alabama, it's going to be a coin flip matchup because both of these teams have shown that they have all the talent to go all the way. But I'm going to say Duke has what it takes. Keep in mind, they did lose Cooper Flagg in the ACC tournament, but he's going to be back. And they managed to do just fine without him. I know you're thinking, well, what about North Carolina? They almost lost. It's a rivalry game. If you're going to try to take out a rival, chances are you're going to be playing to the best of your ability. So that's why I have Duke taking out Alabama. As for the last spot in the Final Four between Houston and Kentucky, I think Houston is just too strong to not put in the Final Four. Give me Houston. So for the Final Four, I have 2 number 1 seeds going against each other with Duke and Houston. And then I have 2 number 2 seeds with Michigan State and St. John's. In the national championship, this is where I have St. John's run end. I'm going to say Michigan State in the national championship. And who do I have taking on Michigan State between Duke and Houston? While I want Houston to win, considering they haven't won a national championship despite being so close so many times, I think Duke is just too strong to not put in a national championship. I have Duke moving on. And then the national championship. A number 1 facing a number 2. Michigan State taking on Duke. Who do I see winning? You would have Michigan State playing for their 3rd title and Duke fighting for banner number 6. I think Cameron Indoor Stadium will see a 6th banner. I'm going to say Duke takes home the national championship. A lot can happen in this tournament, but I think Duke does have what it takes to move on. So that's a full rundown so that's who I have winning each game. Now, can I be wrong? Absolutely. I'm not expecting a perfect bracket. I only expect one of my Final Four picks being right, because that's usually what I end up averaging anyways. But it would be nice to finally pick a national champion, even if it's the majority of what people are picking. But Duke does seem to have a well-rounded roster. And even if you take out Take out one head of the Hydra. You still got 6 other heads you got to worry about. And this is what this team is. It's a Hydra. You cannot defeat it. And if Duke does end up falling short of the Sweet 16, I would be surprised. But we'll see what happens here. It's called March Madness for a reason. Expect the unexpected. But that is going to do it for me. Please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to the Red Rubber Duck One All Sports Network. And be sure to hit that bell icon so you can be notified of any future videos or streams. It's going to be a whole lot of fun covering this whole NCAA tournament. I cannot wait. But, again, that's going to do it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until we meet again, I'll see you guys in the next one.